Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions, the post-fight podcast for UFC 139. I'm going to, of course, you'll be watching as the scores go by. Our 16 competitors in the UFC or Kamikaze Grand Prix prediction tournament. The second of three events of the second round. Some very close matchups. A couple people are pulling away, and all they have to do is have solid third events of the Ultimate Fighter, and they will book their ticket to the third round of the tournament. Thank you guys very much for getting your picks in ahead of time. Only had to chase a couple people for their predictions, just one basically. But overall, UFC 139, I think it was a very exciting card. Kamikaze Overdrive, I went 7-5. I had a good set of picks. A couple things fell apart, and I have a couple admissions I'll make later on. But let's quickly go through the fight. Shamar Bailey versus Danny Castillo. I took Bailey. I got that wrong. Bailey was an upset pick. Might have been a little bit of a premature stoppage, especially the fact there was only between 5 and 8 seconds left in the round. Either way, Castillo looked good, or Shamar Bailey looked bad. One or the other. Not going to dwell on it. Next fight, Matt Brown versus Seth Basinski. Seth Basinski wins by submission. I took Basinski in the upset to win by submission. He looked very good. He did against a solid veteran in Brown. I don't know where this guy's ceiling is, but at 6'3" in the welterweight division, if he can continue making weight, he could be a force. He just has to refine some skills and bring himself along gradually. Miguel Torres, Nick Pace, catchweight bet of 141. I took Torres to win that fight by submission. Torres won by decision, which moved me to 2-1. I don't know, Pace looked a little bit like, he struggled to get inside. He did take Torres down. Miguel Torres is a decent fighter, but you can clearly see he's fighting much more cautious. I don't know where he goes from here. He definitely wants to move up the rankings. It's hard to say, where a good fight for Miguel Torres would be within the division. I'm sure they will line something up for him. He's not the most exciting fighter right now. So, lightweight bout, Gleison Tebow versus Rafael Dos Anjos. I took Tebow by decision. He won by decision, moving to 3-1, and started off a really nice night. Tebow looked good, so did Dos Anjos. Tebow almost hurt him. He shows he has power, but neither one of the guys really went forward outside of that time. So, I wasn't overly impressed with either guy, but it was an okay fight. Middleweight bout, Tom Lawler, Chris Weidman. I took Lawler to defeat Weidman, but I think he thought he could have stopped him with his hands. He didn't really get an opportunity as Weidman took him down and choked him out. Weidman is one of these guys he's got great wrestling, and we see with the Darce choke in this fight, standing guillotine his last fight, he has solid submissions training in the Sarah Longo camp. This guy is going to be a force. If he can bring along his striking and combine striking, wrestling, and submissions, he's going to be a serious problem. So that dropped me to 3-2. A little bit disappointed with Tom Lawler's effort, but he just got outclassed by a better fighter. And Weidman's for real, and I can admit my mistake on that one. Chris Weidman looked good. In the previous two fights, I had taken Weidman in both, so I was 2-0 coming in on Weidman, so a loss is a loss. Up next, Spike, televised card. I took Michael McDonald to beat Alex Soto by submission. He knocks him out 56 seconds in. That bumped my overall record to 4-2 and still looking good, and a lot of credit to Michael McDonald. He looked fantastic. Not going to dwell on it. Soto's a relative newcomer. Michael McDonald, a lot of room to grow at 20 years old. He will be a force in the division. Up next, light heavyweight bout, Ryan Bader, Jason Brills. I took Bader by knockout. He wins it by knockout at minute 17. Moved my overall record to 6-2, and things are looking very nice. I'd say Brills has 3 straight losses. A good effort against Nogueira. A back-to-back knockouts in the early stages of the first round against Vladimir Matyushenko and Ryan Bader, and I think that's going to be it for Brills. He'll probably get his walking papers. Ryan Bader snaps a 2-fight losing streak, desperately needed that win. Good for him. Maybe he could be the type of fighter to welcome somebody like Thiago Silva back to the company. I think that'd be a very interesting fight. Main card, Stephan Bonner versus Kyle Kingsbury. I'm 6-2. 6-2? 5-2. 5-2, sorry. 5-2 at this point. I took Bonner to defeat Kingsbury by TKO. I believe it was by TKO. I'm not 100% sure, actually. Either way, he won by decision. That moved my overall record to 6-2. I was very happy with Bonner's approach. It worked out perfectly. He actually he won a 30-25, which is kind of questionable. But he did what I was hoping he'd do. He just did it quicker. I expected Kingsbury might even win the opening round and Bonner would survive. And then as Kingsbury faded, Bonner would take control. Bonner put the pressure on him very early. Kyle Kingsbury struggled to respond. And after the first part of the fight the first part of the first round was a little bit close. But, but it was certainly I take Bonner. I'm very happy with that. It worked out well. Stephan Bonner's he's called Rampage Jackson. It'd be a good fight for him. If Bonner loses, he's an upper echelon fight. And for Jackson, if he wins that fight, he gets pushed on and gets another opportunity to really promote himself. Welterweight bout, Martin Camp versus Rick Story. Now, I'm reading here that it was called a split decision, but it actually says a mistake was made by one of the judges during the event, scoring the fight 29-28 in favor of Rick Story, initially resulting in a split decision. The call was reversed after the event. So Campman won a unanimous decision victory. I'd say Story won the first round, and this is where my night turned. I was 6-2. Story won the first round, and he was winning the second round. His striking, I think he was doing more damage to Martin Kampmann. He had bloodied him up a couple times. I think he even hurt him. And then Kampmann basically turned my night for the worst when he got that trick, takedown, misdirection trip, took Story down, put him on his back. Rick Story, we found against Charlie Brennan, is not good off his back. That's what we saw here. Martin Kampmann was able to control him, offer up a couple submission attempts. Really zapped Rick Story's energy. Rick Story came out and was throwing caution to win big shots early on in the fight, and I think that took a lot out of him. And as a result, he couldn't maintain the pace. Martin Kampmann, the far more reserved and cautious striker, was able to eventually open up and take care of him, winning the decision. That's big. That's for Story. I think that back-to-back losses, especially against Brenneman and now against Kampmann, knocks him out of the top 10 contenders. And I don't know if this puts Martin Kampmann back in the top 10, but it'll put him on the cusp. I'll probably have him in my rankings, 10, 11, 12 in that range. Rick Story will be just behind him. Rick Story desperately needs to win. Martin Kampmann, I'd like to see Martin Kampmann and Thiago Alves lined up in a fight. I think that'd be a great fight. Two guys that are just on the outside of looking into the top 10 contenders, or right at the, as I said, the cusp of it. Winner of that gets to go back in, and I think the winner of that fight, maybe, it's definitely an interesting fight. Winner of that fight, I don't know who they'd fight. Interesting. Let's get Kampmann Alves going. Bantamweight bout, Uriah Faber versus Brian Bowles. I took Brian Bowles. I'm 6-3 coming to this fight. I took Brian Bowles by decision. And I have a confession to make. This is one of those fights, and I got away from it for a little bit, and I've been struggling a lot the last little while. I did my research, and I said, Uriah Faber takes this fight absolutely no problem. Uriah Faber is the faster of the two fighters. He has better wrestling, better submissions. He's probably the stronger of the two fighters, and his striking is on par. But then I looked at it and I thought, well, Brian Bowles, the odds aren't that, the odds are on that Faber's going to win the fight. And I started coming up with a game plan in my head as to how Brian Bowles could win this fight. And even though Brian Bowles, I really thought Faber was going to win it, I took Bowles, and I made that mistake. And I'm going to try and get away from that. I wanted Bowles to win. And that was part of my problem. I should have picked with my head, which I usually do. Instead, I picked with my heart, if you will, and I took Bowles. Uriah Faber looked fantastic, and he is a legitimate bantamweight threat. He looked like he really used a nice combination of speed, movement, and power to put Bowles away and eventually submit him. And if he comes out with that type of effort, especially the success we saw with Demetrius Johnson using his speed to really force Dominic Cruz, if Faber can do that and then use his wrestling to avoid Dominic Cruz taking him down and keeping him there, Faber could really take a shot at Cruz. And I'm actually really looking forward to that fight. Originally, I had said, no, I don't want to see that fight happen again. Even though it was a good fight, I think Cruz beat him soundly enough. But after looking at that effort, because Bowles is a tough guy, and Faber disposed of him quickly, good for Uriah Faber. So Brian Bowles. Brian Bowles versus Brad Pickett, I think, would be a very good matchup. Two decent contenders, both coming off losses. I think that would be a fun matchup. And it's actually, now that I think about going back, now that Uriah Faber gets a touchdown, how about Miguel Torres versus Enan Barrow? I think that would be an excellent fight, too. If Torres wins, and boom, you've got another number one contender lined up right there, former champion. If Barrow wins, it's a win over a former champ, and he is now the top contender. So there's a matchup. If you're listening, anybody that has input, let's make those ones happen. So now I'm 6-4. Vanderlei Silva, Kung Lee. I talked about questions, and one of the big questions was, would Kung Lee come in shape and not be Hollywood Kung Lee? And I think he came in as Hollywood Kung Lee. He just didn't look good. He looked soft around the midsection. I shouldn't talk, but whatever. I just don't think he looked that good. He threw his kicks, and it's just, his kicking arsenal is fantastic, but he's not in good enough shape to maintain, because kicking takes so much out of you. And Vanderlei, whether that was his game plan or not, Vanderlei looked smart because he stayed on the outside, he absorbed the kicks, he did get hit a couple times spinning back fists and got stumbled a couple times, but for the most part he stayed away from Kung Lee, let Lee kick, a lot of kicks missed, or a lot of kicks got blocked. He did his best to avoid taking a lot of damage, and when Kung Lee started slowing down, Vanderlei picked up the tempo and knocked him out. Would this be a good fight for Vanderlei to go out on top, to retire? Yeah, maybe, because he didn't look fantastic himself. But again, it could have been a game plan, and he was just waiting for Kung Lee to basically, instead of punch himself out, kick himself out. But, where does Vanderlei sit in the middleweight division? That takes Kung Lee. We might not see Kung Lee back at all. Where does Vanderlei sit? I would say he might sit on the outside of the top 15, maybe 15th. I might have him ranked 15th of that win, because Kung Lee has to come out of the rankings, I believe. Who could Vanderlei face? It's a tough question. Anybody that hits hard? Probably not. If Yoshihiro Akiyama hadn't gone down to welterweight, I think that would have been a nice matchup to finally see that one. Outside of that, I really don't know where I'd put Vanderlei Silva. if he wants to continue winning weights, they're going to have to maybe pick his opponents, someone that he can compete with. Not a Brian Stan, not a Chris Lieben, guys with heavy hands. Maybe not Mark Munoz either, because they're not in the same class anymore. But either way, main event. So I'm 6-5. Dan Henderson wins. I took him by knockout. He wins the game by decision. He could have scored the knockout. They could have easily stopped it. So that makes me 7-5. That fight was fantastic. They really threw down. Shogun, I think Dan Henderson won the first 3 rounds easily. Shogun battled back and won rounds 4 and 5. We almost had our first 5-round untitled fight claim a victim. It's Henderson winning the opening 3 rounds and then gassing because it was a high pace. And of course, you got to think of this. Dan Henderson's a lot of pressure. He's coming in back to the UFC. He's in a big fight. Everybody's expecting big things coming off that Fedor knockout. And he fights 3 solid rounds, and then he kind of gasses a little bit, and he runs out of steam. And Shogun looked better in the last 2 rounds, even though he got tagged. Physically, Shogun got beat up and was brutalized, and the damage was on his face. And Dan didn't look nearly as worse for wear, but he was exhausted. And I know Dan's twittered and wants a shot at the title, which is, I think Dan Henderson has the skill set to compete with Shogun, or to compete with John Jones, but not beat him. He has that big power, and if he catches him with the power, absolutely the H-bomb could finish him. Shogun showed what kind of chin he has, and Dan has a type of power especially against a guy like Jones, who's got the untested chin. If Dan connects, Jones could, it could really change the complexion of that fight. That being said, John Jones has the distance and reach, because Dan Henderson at 74 inches, he would be, 10.5 inches to 84.5 for John Jones, 10.5 inches away. We saw Rampage struggle with that. Jones is such a big, tall man at 6'4". Dan coming in at 6'1". I really see some stylistic problems for Dan Henderson getting inside and running out of energy eventually is the way I look at it. And Jones probably finishing him on the mat because we saw Shogun had success and Jones is so big and strong you probably finish him. Where do we go with Shogun from here? Henderson will probably get a title shot, or the other option is Dan Henderson or Rashad Evans title eliminator, which is certainly a possibility. Shogun, where does he go from here? I don't know. It was a grueling fight. He put a heck of an effort out. His cardio, I thought he too looked a little softer on the middle a little bit. He might be losing it despite he's only 29 years old. He's been through some battles. What do I see? Shogun, it's a tough one for me to pick coming off a loss like that. I don't know, maybe Shogun versus Tito Ortiz. Good fight there. Be a good fight for, it'd be a war. Shogun gets a win. He's right back into the mix and at least looks competitive. I actually don't want to see Shogun ever fight John Jones again. That was, he got dominated despite, he got cracked early and that set the tone for the fight. Whatever. He got beat and that's the end of that. 7-5. I said, if I had gone with my heart and taken your eye favor to beat Ryan Bowles, like originally, the Wyman over Lawler, I sought out a win, an upset win, and that's my song. I apologize for maybe saying, picking a pick that I really didn't truly believe in. 7-5, had I gone with my, head on those ones instead of my heart, I could have easily been 9-3, and then I'm celebrating a fantastic night. Either way, 7-5 will move on. Taking a look at the matchups, there are a number of close matchups in the Grand Prix tournament. We have one that's a 39-39 tie. I can't remember off the top of my head who it is. Ninja Death Cult, maybe? Hopefully, you've probably got there by now because we're after the time. Either way, it's looking good. One more event, so do not miss your picks. One more event. I'm in a very close matchup, very tight matchup, so I'm going to have to really put it on at the next event. It'll be the Ultimate Fighter 14 finale. We'll probably be predicting every fight that's put on there, so be ready for that one. Probably going to be between 8 and 10 fights. Maybe it could be more than that. Either way, there's a couple matchups that are a little bit lopsided and look to be over, but either way, do not, don't screw up, because if somebody gets going and they get, they run the table, could be 30 points. So either way, really enjoying it. UFC 139 was a very entertaining card, top to finish. Like, all the fights were fun to watch, and we have some definite success going forward. These fighters have some success going forward. I think that's enough from me. I don't want to talk too much more because NFL Sunday, week 11, I believe it is, kicks off in about 4 minutes. I'm going to go watch that and hopefully win a little bit of cash and recover from near wins last night. And I hope everyone has a good time. It's my birthday, November 20th, so happy birthday to me. And I will catch you guys later. Thanks for listening.